Valdez, what's your weakest signal?
Okay, so I came across a syllabus, also like a certain kind of emergent online infrastructure for something called Pirate Care. It fits into all this talk around the care economy that we've been like chatting about here and there, and the rise of things like Women on Waves that does like different forms of like on sea abortion as a form of like piracy care activism. People are also frustrated with the like bureaucratic regime of the contemporary moment. And so there's the rise of like pirate kindergartens in Italy, where because there's so much bureaucratization around getting credentialed to like take care of somebody's kids, people are forming these underground networks of like pirate kindergartens where they basically like don't follow the state guidelines of who is credited and not credited. The care economy that I used to think of as more of like an identity left politics is like a little different than I would have thought. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm changing my like opinion about it or anything.
So what's the piracy? Because I understand the other meaning of piracy to be like a robbing and pillaging kind of thing, and this sounds more like homebrew than robbing and pillaging.
So I think the tech side is part of it. It's not one that I spoke about. They themselves call themselves like amateur librarians and like forming pirate libraries because it's a syllabus. So they're like taking all these, which is in like the standard like Aaron Schwartz style breaking of documents and all of the rights management software that like prevents their use or whatever institutional preventions. So that's like part of the story. I think the idea, maybe I need like more examples of like where care is being prevented by certain kinds of either like corporate or state actors. So the bureaucratization idea of like the kindergartens not being allowed because you need to have potentially some kind of like ridiculous certification.
If it's piracy in the Aaron Schwartz sort of sense, is it just basically like the cypherpunk movement applied to like the care economy in some sense?
Literally, is it the same people?
Yeah. Is there like an overlap between like people using cryptography and things like that for like making these syllabus like free and removable from the internet or something like that?
I think it's more this like contemporary like Renaissance style people who you see more and more of, who are like part of like the art world, but they're also very tech savvy and maybe they have some like activist stream in them. Like, but they're not. I would not think of it as cypherpunk.
This idea when you were talking about like pirate kindergartens, and I immediately took it to like bootlegging kindergarten. Is this related, this concept? Because it kind of, the signal for me, it was like this creative pathway to go down of like, what can we pirate that we don't normally think about pirating? And certainly care is one thing where it's like, yeah, there's all these licenses and certifications that are required. And then there are people who have these skills and capabilities who don't have those for whatever reasons or don't have them locally and could be able to provide these services or offer these services under a pirated whatever it is, you know.
It's fairly obvious to me what pirate treatment looks like because I do enough work and read enough stuff about what goes on in the pharma industry that like if you're involved in the treatment of people, you are a victim to piracy.
Tons of this for sure.
Heavily already. But care, that's very interesting.
Yeah. All these examples are ones that I come across before. But when you name this thing like care and piracy brought together, then it becomes self-fulfilling, generative type of like what you were saying. Like you can think of new ways to apply this idea into new domains. It's like a creative exercise, you know, and retroactively naming these things as belonging to a lineage.
What you're talking about is making me think about how badly the COVID outbreak has been impacting old folks' homes and the extent to which women are the ones who work in these spaces. My mom works in a long-term care facility. Well, my mom manages a food and nutrition department. And when things started getting real, all of her workers started quitting. So they were extremely understaffed. And they had like 90 or 100 residents to be feeding and to be changing and to be cleaning up after and stuff like that. And so all my mom's regular workers went AWOL. And then they started bringing in a bunch of these kind of under-certified, but we're not really talking about it, people who are willing to work in these homes. And a lot of them were immigrant women who didn't necessarily have like the right qualifications to be doing that work, but they really needed people to come in and do this work.
That was the job I took in SARS too. We can't get healthcare professionals to come to work. So what if we pay you $30 to pretend to be someone who knows what's going on?
Exactly.
But there's a relationship there, I think, and you can see how if that type of thing can happen, then why not set up the pirate old folks home, you know, without the qualifications and just can you be trusted enough without certifications?
At this point, are the consequences of what happens in a pirate long-term care facility going to be any worse than what happens in 80% of the long-term care facilities in America?
But the other thing this took me to is this idea of like piracy as enterprise. And wasn't Uber like kind of pirate taxis at the beginning? That's sort of also what a lot of these things, like is it just pirate kindergarten or, any of these things are kind of
That's
I don't like the word pirate.
No, I don't feel like it's a good word anymore. I feel like the last time I remember.
Last time was good when Johnny Depp was doing.
Be a good thing, yeah. It's either Johnny Depp or it's like some story of the Macintosh team at Apple in the early '80s, and they're like, "We're pirates. We're going to revolutionize the personal computer, the fire in the valley, man." And other than that, I have mostly bad evocations.
Mostly bad. What would be a better term? Because alternative is too bland. And
I mean, open care is kind of sounds like a DNS service.
What if we called it like Robin
Care
Hood Care?
2.0 is 2.2. That's
or fucking homeschooling. Legitimate, just homeschooling.
Sure.
Like, or like a
underground
little
is kind
teeny
of a nice
Montessori.
I kind of like alt care.
Also is another word.
Alt's gotten a bad rep lately.
I like that it's called piracy, actually. I think it's provocative. I think it's interesting.
I sort of feel the same way.
Putting a stake in
it is. Here we are talking
money.
about it, so it did work.
You don't necessarily have the most like long-term view of piracy because maroon colonies and things like this that were like pirate-based in the like 1700s in the New World, they've been like looked at by different kinds of mostly like anarchist groups as like utopias that actually existed. They were like genuinely democratic,
economically integrated utopias.
Yeah.
I don't know about all of that. You see, the thing is that pirates were heavily involved in the shipment of people, and so like from some perspectives, you could see like they were breaking away from like European monarchies and building their own lives, but they were still engaging in like the economic heyday of the day, which was literally enslaving people and stuff. And I think that's where my ear of the word pirate comes from, because it's important for people to obviously, not conform, but at the same time,
there's a lot of different pirates that you could point to.
I guess that's a part of my angle is the pirates aren't always bad. They're opportunists. They're entrepreneurial opportunists, and so it's a tricky thing to put around a community. Signal for sure.
I would just say that the slave trade was like a highly regulated, like state-driven affair, and not like an anarchic kind of piracy-driven thing. There was like a lot of like
if you look into it, there's a lot of like people who were just doing things rogue and stealing whole ships full of people.
Well, yeah. Once governments have regulated things, it becomes easier to do illegal versions of them.
Signal Illinois.
I like it. It's a signal.
I think
signal.
I would say it's a signal, but in the sense that Val said it's a signal, which is that I think retrospectively, once you put a term around it, I think it's a generative tool, and we can think of other ways to apply this term.
It wasn't really about the pirate, like the pirate kindergarten is only one part of it. We're talking about like the extension of the care economy in general, and like new examples of it, of how people are like breaking away from the system and creating their own models of doing things, right?
I mean, childcare is one of the things that happens in gray / black market, I guess you could call it, ways like all the time. It's so normal. No one would even blink an eye about that idea, right? Like,
babysitters.
Yeah, babysitters. The naming is kind of significant in that way, whereas because like some examples of this are so normal, part of accepted everyday life that you wouldn't even think to name them, like something like piracy.
That's a part of what I was getting stuck on too, is that like in some ways pirates and piracy, there's a bit of a gulf there that maybe there wasn't always, where there's more flexibility and fluidity in those words than there used to be when they were maybe closer together.
In the kindergarten example, what is being pirated? Well,
it's because you need to have a certain kind of certification in order to set up that involves paperwork and fees and things.
The delivery of care system is being pirated.
Yeah.
And you could pirate the education as well, or you could...
And the content, And the tools. You could, cracked Blackboard and stuff. That's going to save you a lot of money.